Video games have always been weird. I know this because I first started playing them on my family's NES and Apple IIe. Games were weird then, and they've been weird ever since. After all, this is the medium where grabbing a leaf, which gives you a raccoon tail that allows you to fly, somehow makes complete sense. Whether we're talking about bizarre premises, outlandish stories, offbeat art styles, or wacky gameplay built upon decades of oddball conventions, this medium has been a ready home for the weirdest of the weird. And I'm here for it. Keeping this eccentric tradition alive, I'd like to share some of the weirdest games I've come across here in 2024. And there's no better candidate to start with than Cryptmaster.
Yes, give it a good soaking.
In the name of all that is pure and peaceful, I'll rip your bunions off!
Cryptmaster takes a standard party-based fantasy RPG experience and spices it up with satirical irreverence, an eye-catching black and white aesthetic, and, most importantly and most weirdly, typing mechanics. Characters perform abilities based on a set of words which we'll have to spell out in the heat of the moment. That's a zany design decision for sure, but what makes Cryptmaster so commendable is its commitment to the bit. Instead of your standard RPG stats like spell power and hit points or whatnot, enemies will react to certain letters, either blocking them, taking more damage from them, or a litany of other effects. Looting treasure now becomes a guessing game, where we first ask questions about the item's characteristics, then type in whatever we think it is. Using the letters from the name of said treasure, we start to fill in the blanks of our character's next ability or level up, which is a pretty ingenious approach to mechanical character progression if you ask me. If I have a critique of Cryptmaster, it's that it seems to lose some steam toward the middle part of the game. By that I mean the rate at which the game introduces curveballs and change-ups into its progression formula slows down after a point and things begin to feel rather samey. Otherwise, Cryptmaster stands out from the crowd, in a good way and for a good reason. You've probably heard of mouthwashing at this point. It's 2024's indie darling, which you can see in its already large and, let's just say, enthusiastic fanbase. The long and short of it is that mouthwashing is a narrative-focused horror experience with relatively light interactivity. That's not to say it would be better as a movie. There are definitely moments within that are made far more effective and affecting by playing them. But all in all, it's a pretty basic delivery system for a wonderful payload, which is a superbly presented story. We follow the crew of a space freighter, which in the opening of the game has just crashed into an asteroid. This forces our gang of space truckers to adapt to some less than ideal circumstances, setting the scene for dark subject matter and compelling character interactions. We're presented this story in a piecemeal fashion, jumping around different points in the timeline and with the occasional shift in perspective. Layered over top of this is a biting, sardonic tone coupled with a psychological horror lens which obfuscates reality and hallucination. At several points, the game blends together the literal and the metaphorical in mesmerizing ways. I won't go into much more detail. If you haven't experienced mouthwashing yet and it sounds interesting, I'd highly recommend you check it out. Relatively speaking, mouthwashing is probably the least weird or out there game in this video, in the sense that it's primarily a darkly satirical psychological horror narrative, and the rest of the elements of the game serve that narrative directly. It's still damn good for what it is, though. We have a joke amongst my fellow game dev friends and I about pitching new game concepts, which is blank, but make it roguelike. It works best when paired with some unlikely game style, for example, golf, but make it roguelike, or farming sim, but make it roguelike. This joke, if you can call it that, is starting to lose its punchiness as more and more people are not only doing these absurd combinations, but they're going all in on these prompts. Those mad lads. On this front, there are two games from this year that come to mind, both of which follow the oddball North Star of pachinko, but make it roguelike, each of them traversing their own unique path. I first came across Peglin, which is best described as the unlikely marriage of Peggle with Slay the Spire. This involves a turn-based RPG battle system where encounters are defined from assorted pegboard layouts. Your attacks and abilities are influenced by the type and number of pegs you hit with each launch of your pinballs. It's in that set of pinballs where the roguelike elements join the party, where you can add new balls with all manner of weird properties or upgrade your existing ones. Ballionaire also involves pinballs and pegs, but more in the spirit of what if Balatro used Plinko instead of poker. Each round you need to reach a score threshold to advance. Instead of modifying the pinballs like Peglin does, Ballionaire's roguelike piece involves upgrading the pegboard itself. We'll not only need to find synergies between different peg types, but also think carefully about their positioning on our board. Peglin definitely has some rough edges in terms of design and presentation, but overall it's a successful and delightful mashup of two very different classics. Ballionaire similarly makes good on its premise, but it can feel a bit chaotic in its emergent interactions and its underlying randomness at times. All said, I think both of these games are a good time and further proof that wacky genre alchemy can work.
Blood of our Lord and God and Savior Jesus
I love games about games. Games that deliberately employ design conventions in order to remark on them or satirize them. And that's part of the reason why I found myself drawn to Indica. Indica follows the story of an Orthodox Christian nun in Russia circa 1900. Our title character is shunned and disrespected by her sisters, forced to do menial tasks which are ultimately a waste of time. And yes, we the player get to experience all the excitement of lugging a bucket of water back and forth from a well, as Indica's internal monologue reinforces how unnecessary this all is. As someone who has very little tolerance for fetch quest, drudgery, and the like in games these days, I couldn't help but smile as the game does this with its tongue firmly planted in its cheek. This is the first indication that Indica is looking to employ often worn-out gameplay tropes to not only service its stories, but to comment on the medium as a whole. The most obvious of said tropes is a points system, which follows the logic of whose line is it anyway.
Show where everything's made up and the points don't matter.
The game even directly tells you in loading screens and the like that the points are worthless. And its laughably simple skill tree further underscores this. But Indica isn't just doing crude parody here. It ties the system to a pretty powerful narrative payoff later. For the most part, Indica is a third-person walk-and-talk puzzle platformer, but it pulls in other elements when it sees fit. Most notably are Indica's flashbacks to childhood, which usually employ vintage game mechanics with pixely visuals, things like a 2D platforming section or a top-down racer. Indica is chiefly concerned with its narrative, so none of this is all that groundbreaking, but these are nice little flourishes which punctuate the bigger tale being told here. Without getting into spoilers too much, this story has a farcical nature to it. Part of why Indica seems so troubled in her life is that she's hearing the voice of the devil in her head. This voice irreverently comments on what's happening, sometimes contradicting Indica when she starts saying things she may not completely believe. The setting also communicates a degree of absurdity, such as the massive scale of these fish in the caviar factory. In the end, Indica is a trip. It tells a sharp yet moving story, and it uses its interactivity in smart ways. And at about 4 hours of playtime, it doesn't overstay its welcome either. I feel like workplace simulator horror is not that weird of a pitch nowadays. You know, taking on the role of a worker drone in a suspicious operation, well, that's just an evergreen premise right there. Especially if you accentuate it by making the player do a list of humdrum rote tasks that are sure to inflame their curiosity. Threshold follows that formula pretty closely, but still manages to bring the weird. From the get-go, we're presented a choice of country which serves as the game's difficulty setting. Yes, you heard me right. The job itself is rather nonsensical. We have to blow a whistle every once in a while to keep a seemingly infinite train moving at the appropriate speed, and maybe sometimes clean some gunk out of a stream of water? We're doing this atop a mountain, so as we perform our duties, we will eventually run out of oxygen, which we'll need to refill by biting into glass canisters. Oh, and we're replacing someone who just died a few hours ago. Nothing suspicious about that, no worry. As you can surmise, things aren't what they seem. But how do you get out of this uncanny situation? Well, you're just going to have to figure that out on your own. Quick question, does a game with a bonkers control scheme and a low tolerance for error sound fun to you? Keep whatever answer you have in mind as I introduce you to Slackers, Carts of Glory. The premise here is you're one of said slackers on a quest to get some more brews from the store before it closes. Naturally, this means racing through the streets aboard your trusty steed. No, not a horse, nor a car, nor a bike, or a scooter, or even a skateboard, but instead a humble shopping cart. The key implication here is you have no brakes. You can pivot and push yourself whichever way you're facing, so you're going to have to control your momentum carefully. Any contact with, say, the scenery or passing traffic will likely kill you, but no worry, respawns are fast. Needless to say, this control scheme and environment feels quite Bennett Foddian. I certainly found myself frustrated for about the first half hour of attempts, but eventually something clicked and I started to feel the movement. I wouldn't say I ever really mastered it, but once I got into a groove, Slackers actually became quite addictive. The low threshold for failure is certainly a source of frustration from time to time, sure, but the overall mindset invoked here reminds me of my speedrunning days. That is, it's all about executing for short bursts, and while failing over and over is irritating, it makes putting together a successful run all the more gratifying. The gameplay is certainly the main source of weirdness for Slackers, but the game also has a very Mike Judge vibe in terms of mood and aesthetics. It's somewhere between Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill, the latter a little more so due to the soundtrack's alt-country and rockabilly sensibilities. And if you have an appetite for janky physics-based gameplay, I have just the dish for you. My weirdest game of 2024... I feel like publisher Critical Reflex was on a hunt for weird games this year. We've already talked about Mouthwashing and Threshold. Completing their hat trick is Arctic Eggs, which asks the really tough questions like, can you fry an egg on top of Mount Everest? I've used the words absurd and irreverent a bunch of times already in this video, and frankly, they're insufficient for the task at hand, which is to say that Arctic Eggs may be the weirdest game I've ever played. And it starts with the gameplay, which certainly seems like a zany game jam prompt that the developers here have taken very, very seriously. We control the pitch and roll of a frying pan as we're frying up some eggs. We need to gently slide the egg around the pan to get it to cook on one side, then with a snap of the wrist flip it over and repeat the process on the other side. That's challenging enough as is, but Arctic Eggs of course goes above and beyond by throwing all manner of curveballs at us. Beer bottles, cigarettes, even bullets will join the pan, which really makes the gameplay an exercise in juggling. That's weird enough, and the world and characters of Arctic Eggs further demolish any remaining sense of normalcy. Again, calling this absurdity doesn't quite do it justice. I still question if Arctic Eggs is a real game at all, rather than a recollection of a fever dream I had years ago. Thank you for accompanying me on this rundown of the weirdest games I've played this year. But I know there's still weirder stuff out there, so go ahead, please share the weirdest games you played this year down in the comments and tell me what your favorites were. And if you want some more weird games, might I suggest you check out the very first video I did for this channel, 10 Weird Classics You Ought to Play. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and Happy New Year.